It was a cold, quiet night in the small town of Maple Creek. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale light over the dusty roads and scattered buildings. In the quiet of the countryside, life seemed to go on slowly, almost peacefully. But in the heart of one particular family, there was a growing sense of unease. Emma had always loved her childhood home. The farm her father worked so hard to maintain was her safe place, her haven. She spent her days playing near the barn, running through the fields with her dog and helping her mother in the kitchen. The ranch was where she felt the most at peace, surrounded by the smells of fresh hay and the soft whinny of horses in the stable. Her father, a strong and hard-working man, had raised her with love and care. She had always admired him, looked up to him, and trusted him above anyone else. But lately, something had been different. For the past few weeks, Emma had noticed strange things happening late at night. She had always been a light sleeper, and the sounds of the house settling were nothing new. Yet around midnight she began hearing footsteps outside her window. Light, careful steps, like someone was trying to be as quiet as possible. At first she thought it was just her imagination. After all, the house was old and it creaked at night. But then, the footsteps started happening night after night at the exact same time. Curiosity gnawed at her. Was it the wind? Perhaps an animal was sneaking around the yard? But Emma knew it wasn't. The sound of the footsteps was too deliberate, too quiet, and too rhythmic. And there was something even stranger. Every time the footsteps reached the back door, Emma would hear it. A soft creak, like the door was being pushed open just a little bit. Her heart would race at the sound, but she never went to check. She didn't want to disturb whatever was going on. One particular night, her unease reached a breaking point. It was a Friday, and the wind howled outside, shaking the windows. Emma couldn't sleep at all. The sounds of the night, the creaking of the house, the whispering wind, they all seemed louder than usual. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the unsettling feeling that had been growing inside her for days. And then, there it was again. The footsteps. This time they sounded closer. Emma's heart started to pound. She pulled the covers tightly around her breath quickening. Slowly, as if in a trance, she slid out of bed and crept toward the window. She carefully pushed the curtain aside, trying to get a glimpse of whatever was causing the noise. She held her breath, hoping that she was just imagining it. When she looked outside, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Her father, the man she had always trusted, was standing by the back door looking around cautiously as if checking to make sure no one was watching. He moved swiftly, almost quietly, and slipped through the door. Emma froze, unable to believe her eyes. It wasn't just the footsteps that had been strange. Her father was sneaking out in the middle of the night, and he had no explanation. Emma's mind raced as she tried to process what she had just witnessed. Why was her father sneaking around? Where was he going? And why was he being so secretive? Her father had always been a man of honesty. He had always promised her that there was nothing in life that could not be shared between them. So why was he acting this way now? Her mind spun with confusion and fear. It wasn't like him to hide anything. He was the pillar of their family, the strong, dependable man who had worked tirelessly to provide for them. He had taught her how to ride horses, how to take care of the animals, and how to respect the land. He had always been her hero, so why would he be sneaking around in the dark? Emma felt a knot form in her stomach. She couldn't just lie there in bed anymore. She had to know the truth. She had to find out what her father was up to. She threw on her robe, grabbed a flashlight from the drawer, and quietly opened her bedroom door. She crept down the hallway, careful not to wake her mother, who was sound asleep. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and her mind was racing with 1,000 questions. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Outside, the night air was crisp and cool as Emma tiptoed toward the back door. She didn't know why she was doing it. She didn't know what she was hoping to find. All she knew was that something was wrong, and she couldn't ignore it any longer. She reached the door and carefully turned the handle. The door creaked open, just as she had heard before, and Emma stepped outside, her bare feet touching the cold ground. The yard was dark, the only light coming from the distant moon. She could barely see anything, but she knew the layout of the ranch better than anyone. She followed the path she had seen her father take the night before. The grass under her feet was damp from the evening dew, and the sound of her breathing was the only thing she could hear. Every step felt heavier than the last. Emma finally reached the corner of the barn where she saw her father's figure again. He was standing still, talking quietly to someone. The words were too muffled for her to understand, but she could see the outline of a person standing next to him. It wasn't another rancher, that much was clear. The stranger's clothes were different. They didn't belong to anyone Emma knew. Her heart skipped a beat. What was going on here? Who was her father talking to at this hour? And why had he kept this secret from her? The man and her father spoke for a few more moments before Emma's father turned and began walking back toward the house. Emma quickly hid behind the barn, not wanting to be seen. Her breath caught in her throat as she watched her father slip back into the house as quietly as he had left. He closed the door softly and all was silent again. Emma stood frozen for a long time, her mind struggling to make sense of what she had just witnessed. She had seen enough to know that something was happening, something her father had kept hidden from her. But what? Who was that man? Why was her father sneaking around with him? And why had he not told her? Confusion turned to fear, and fear turned to worry. What was she supposed to do now? She couldn't just ignore it. She couldn't pretend like nothing had happened. Her trust in her father had been shattered. She needed answers, but she didn't know how to get them. She walked back toward the house, feeling more alone than ever. This was only the beginning. She could feel it deep in her bones. There was a secret her father had been hiding, and Emma was determined to find out what it was, no matter what it took. Emma couldn't sleep that night. Her mind was spinning with questions, each one leading to more confusion and uncertainty. After witnessing her father's strange behavior, she felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, peering into a dark, unknown abyss. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know what it was or how deep the mystery went. All she knew was that she couldn't just ignore it. She had to know what her father was up to, and she couldn't do it alone. Her first thought was to tell her mother, but Emma quickly dismissed the idea. She knew her mother would be upset. They had always been a close-knit family, and her mother trusted her father completely. Emma didn't want to break that trust, not without understanding what was really happening. So she decided to keep it to herself for the time being. But there was someone else she could turn to. The rancher, Mr. Hank Miller, was one of the most respected men in Maple Creek. He wasn't just any rancher, he was a man who had lived through countless challenges in life. He had seen everything from droughts to wildfires, and his wisdom was something everyone in the town turned to. Even Emma's father, who had always been a proud and independent man, would go to Hank for advice when he didn't know what to do. Emma had always admired Hank for his level-headed nature and his ability to see things from all angles. The rancher's house was just a short walk from Emma's family farm, tucked away behind a row of large oak trees. The light from his porch glowed warmly against the night, and Emma could see the silhouette of his figure through the window, sitting comfortably by the fire. For a moment she hesitated. Was it right to involve him? Should she be handling this on her own? But deep down Emma knew that she needed help. She needed someone who could make sense of all this, someone who had the experience to understand what was happening. With a deep breath, she walked up the gravel path to Hank's front door and knocked softly. The door creaked open, and there he stood, tall, with a weathered face and kind eyes, a man who had seen enough in life to know when something wasn't right. His eyes softened when he saw Emma, and without a word he stepped aside to let her in. "Evening, Emma. What's on your mind, girl?" Hank asked in his slow, deliberate way. His voice was deep and calm, and it had a way of making people feel at ease, even in the most difficult of situations. Emma took a seat by the fire, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "Mr. Miller, I don't know what to do. Something's not right. I think my father's hiding something from me. He's been sneaking out at night, and I don't know who he's been meeting or why he's keeping it a secret." Hank listened quietly, his brow furrowing as he absorbed her words. He didn't interrupt, knowing that Emma needed to get it all out. When she finished, he sat back in his chair, his fingers tapping gently on the armrest as he thought for a moment. "Emma," he began slowly, "you're right to be worried. But before we go jumping to conclusions, we need to think carefully. Your father is a good man. He's always done what's best for his family. If he's acting different, there's probably a good reason behind it. But the question is, what is that reason?" Emma nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and nervousness. It was comforting to hear Hank's words, but they only raised more questions. What could be so important that her father had to hide it? Was it something dangerous? Or maybe it was something that would change everything Emma thought she knew about him. Do you think we should confront him? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can just ignore it. But at the same time, I don't want to make things worse. Hank sighed deeply, his gaze turning to the fire as if he were weighing the situation carefully. It's not always easy to confront someone you love, especially when you don't know what the truth is. But if your father is keeping secrets, it might be better to know what those secrets are. The longer you wait, the harder it'll be. Sometimes the truth can be a hard thing to face, but it's always better than living in the dark. Emma felt a surge of determination. She knew Hank was right. She couldn't keep hiding from the truth, not when it involved her father. But she also didn't want to do anything that would cause a rift in their relationship. She had to approach this carefully, and she needed Hank's help to figure out the next steps. What do you think we should do? Emma asked, her eyes searching his face for guidance. Hank thought for a moment before answering. We're not going to confront him just yet. That's too much too soon. We need to understand what's going on first. You've seen your father sneaking out. Let's see if we can follow him, see where he's going and who he's meeting. We'll take it slow. If he's keeping something from you, we'll find out what it is. But we have to be careful. Emma felt a sense of relief wash over her. For the first time in days, she wasn't alone with her thoughts. Hank had given her a plan, a way to approach the situation without making any rash decisions. She didn't know where it would lead, but she trusted Hank. He had seen so much in his life, and if anyone could help her understand her father's secret, it was him. The next night, Hank and Emma stayed up late, watching from a distance as Emma's father slipped out of the house once again. They waited until he was out of sight, then followed him quietly through the darkened streets. The rancher's old boots made no sound as they walked, and Emma's heart raced with each step. What if they were wrong? What if her father was doing something perfectly innocent? But deep down, Emma knew there was more to the story. They followed her father for a long while through the winding paths and past the old barns on the outskirts of town. Emma felt the weight of the night press down on her shoulders as they neared a small rundown cabin on the edge of the woods. She had never seen this place before. It wasn't far from the ranch, but it was hidden away, tucked out of sight from the main road. Her father stopped in front of the cabin and knocked twice on the door. A figure emerged from the shadows, a man she didn't recognize. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and his face was shadowed in the dim light. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she watched her father greet the man with a handshake. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language spoke volumes. They were close, like old friends. Emma's mind raced. Who was this man? Why had her father been sneaking around with him in the middle of the night? And what was so important that he couldn't tell her? As the two men spoke, Emma felt a sense of dread settle in her chest. She didn't know who this man was, but she knew that her father's secret was deeper than she had imagined. She and Hank stood there in silence, watching the scene unfold. For the first time, Emma realized that her father wasn't just hiding something from her. He was hiding a piece of his past. And it was something she was going to have to uncover, no matter what it took. The night was heavy with silence as Emma and Hank stood in the shadows, watching her father speak with the stranger outside the cabin. Emma's heart raced with a mix of fear and confusion. Who was this man? Why had her father been sneaking out? To meet him? She hadn't expected to find a secret like this, but now that she had, there was no turning back. She had to know the truth. They stood in the darkness for what felt like an eternity, the cold air nipping at their skin. The two men continued to talk, their voices low and indistinct. Every so often, Emma would catch a few words, but they didn't make much sense. She could only hear bits and pieces, something about old debts, promises, and a chance for redemption, but nothing that gave her the full picture. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Emma's father and the stranger shook hands, and the stranger disappeared back into the cabin. Emma's father stood there for a few more moments, his shoulders hunched as if weighed down by the world. Then he turned and started walking back in the direction of the ranch. Emma and Hank quickly ducked behind a large tree to avoid being seen. Her father didn't look back, but Emma couldn't help but feel a deep sadness as she watched him walk away. She had seen him in many situations over the years, but never like this. This wasn't the father she had grown up with. This man was hiding something, and the weight of his secret was clearly taking a toll on him. Once her father was out of sight, Emma and Hank stayed where they were, not speaking for a long while. Emma's mind was racing. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to come together, but they didn't quite fit. There was something about the way her father had spoken to the stranger, the way they had acted together, that made her feel like she was missing a huge part of the story. "I don't get it, Mr. Miller," Emma finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would my father be meeting this man in secret? What does he have to do with us?" Hank, who had been watching the whole scene quietly, exhaled slowly. "I think we need to dig deeper, Emma. This isn't just about a late-night meeting or a secret handshake. Your father's been through a lot in his life, and I have a feeling that this man, whoever he is connected to something from your father's past." Emma's heart sank. She had always known her father had a past, everyone did, but she had never thought it would be something that would affect her. She had always seen him as a steady rock in her life. He was the one who had taught her how to ride horses, how to care for the land, and how to face challenges head-on. But now it seemed that her father's past wasn't as simple as she had believed. There were things about him that she didn't know, things he had kept hidden for years. "What kind of past?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. Hank looked at her, his expression serious. "I can't say for sure, Emma, but there's a chance that this man is connected to something your father did years ago, something he's been trying to make right. It could be something that happened long before you were born. Sometimes people make choices when they're young that they regret later, and if they don't get the chance to fix them, that regret can weigh them down for the rest of their lives." Emma nodded, taking in his words. She understood the idea of regret. After all, she had her own moments of regret, things she wished she could change. But this was different. This wasn't just about making mistakes. This was about something her father had kept from her, something that had been hidden for years. "We need to find out more about this man," Hank continued. "If your father is trying to make things right, maybe we can help him. But first we need to understand what's really going on." Emma agreed, but there was a lingering feeling of dread in her chest. What if the truth was too much to bear? What if her father had done something so terrible that it would change everything she thought she knew about him? The next few days were filled with uncertainty. Emma couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious man, and she knew that she couldn't rest until she found out who he was and what he wanted from her father. She spent hours walking the ranch, her mind turning over the possibilities. Could the man have been an old friend of her father's? Or was he someone from a time long before she was born? Someone whose presence would stir up memories that her father had buried deep inside? Emma needed answers, and she needed them fast. One afternoon, as Emma was feeding the horses, she noticed something strange. Her father had left his jacket on a chair in the kitchen. Normally, he would never forget something like that. But this time, Emma felt like it was a clue she couldn't ignore. She carefully picked up the jacket and noticed something in the pocket. It was a small, crumpled piece of paper. Emma's heart skipped a beat. Could this be something important? She unfolded the paper carefully, trying not to tear it. The handwriting was messy, almost frantic. It read, "I'll be waiting at the old barn at midnight. It's time to settle things." Emma's eyes widened as she read the words over and over again. The old barn. She had heard of it before. It was a place where her father had worked years ago before they moved to their current farm. It was a building that had been abandoned for years, left to rot in the corner of their land. But why would her father meet someone there? And what did it mean that it's time to settle things? Emma's mind raced. This was it. This was the lead she had been waiting for. She had to go to the old barn. She had to find out what her father was hiding. There was no turning back now. Later that night, after her father had gone to bed, Emma slipped out of the house. She wasn't sure what she was hoping to find, but she knew it was important. She made her way to the old barn, the wind howling through the trees. The barn loomed ahead, its wooden walls creaking in the cold. As she stepped closer, Emma felt a sense of dread wash over her. This was it. This was the place where everything would be revealed. When Emma reached the barn, she stopped. The door was slightly ajar, just as her father's note had said. She pushed it open slowly and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the floor creaked under her weight. She stood there in the dark, her breath coming in short gasps. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew that tonight everything would change. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the corner of the barn. Emma froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Was it her father? Was it the man he had been meeting? Or was it someone else entirely? And then, from the darkness, a voice spoke. "Emma?" It was her father's voice. Emma turned, her heart racing, and saw him standing there in the shadows, looking at her with a mixture of surprise and guilt. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice strained. "How did you find this place?" Emma's mouth went dry. She had finally found him, but now that she had, what was she supposed to say? Emma's heart was beating wildly in her chest as she stood in the dark, her father's figure emerging from the shadows. The weight of the moment felt almost unbearable. She had come here to find answers, to uncover the truth about her father's secret life. But now that she was face to face with him, she didn't know what to say. Her father's face was tired, lined with years of hard work and perhaps something more, something he had been hiding from her for a long time. His eyes, usually so steady and confident, now appeared uncertain, as if he hadn't expected to be caught. Emma could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. He took a step closer, his voice low but steady. "Emma, you shouldn't be here. This isn't a place for you." His words felt like a plea, as though he were trying to protect her from something. But from what? "Why, Dad, why have you been sneaking out at night?" Emma asked, her voice shaking with a mix of frustration and fear. "Why are you meeting that man? What's going on?" Her father sighed deeply, rubbing his hand over his face as if he were trying to gather his thoughts. "I never wanted you to find out about this, Emma. I didn't want to drag you into something that's been part of my life for far too long." Emma felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "What do you mean? You're my father. We've always been close. You've always been there for me. Why is this something you couldn't tell me?" There was a long silence as her father shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze. "Because I've made mistakes, Emma. Big mistakes. And I've been trying to make them right." Emma's mind raced. "Mistakes? What kind of mistakes, Dad?" Her father looked down at the ground, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of the years had suddenly become too much for him to bear. "Before you were born, I did some things I'm not proud of. Things I should have never done. And one of those things involved that man you saw me meeting." Emma's heart sank. She had known that there was something her father was hiding, but she hadn't expected this. "Who is he, Dad? Why is he so important to you?" Her father seemed to struggle for the right words, but after a few moments he spoke again, his voice quieter now. "His name is John, and he used to be my best friend. We worked together years ago, before you were born. We had a business together, a cattle ranch that we started from the ground up. But things went wrong. John made some bad choices, and it led to the business falling apart. He took a lot of money, Emma, and left me to clean up the mess." Emma's eyes widened. "What do you mean he took the money? Was it a scam?" Her father nodded slowly. "Yes, but it wasn't just about the money. It was about trust. We were supposed to be partners, but John betrayed me in the worst way possible. And that's why I left everything behind and started over here. I thought I could leave that part of my life behind. But John showed up again a few months ago. And when he did, it was like everything came rushing back." Emma felt her mind spinning as she processed the information. "So you've been meeting him all this time because you're trying to fix things with him?" Her father nodded. "I've been trying to help him. He's been struggling for years, Emma. He's lost everything because of what he did, and he came to me asking for a second chance. I couldn't just turn him away. I couldn't leave him to keep living with the guilt of what he did." Emma shook her head, trying to understand. "But why all the secrecy? Why couldn't you just tell me? You've always been honest with me before. Why keep something like this hidden?" Her father stepped forward, his eyes filled with regret. "I didn't want to hurt you, Emma. I didn't want you to know that your father had made such a mess of things. I didn't want you to see me as a failure. I've always tried to protect you from the things I've done wrong. But I see now that keeping this secret from you has only made things worse." Emma took a deep breath, her emotions swirling inside her. She had always admired her father for his strength, his dedication, and his unwavering love for their family. But now she was seeing a side of him that was broken and vulnerable. He wasn't the perfect man she had always believed him to be. He was human, flawed just like everyone else. I'm not angry with you, Dad, Emma said softly, her voice trembling. I'm just confused. I don't know what to think about all of this. You've always told me that honesty is the most important thing, but now I feel like everything I've believed about you is built on a lie. Her father's face softened with understanding. I never meant to deceive you, Emma. I just didn't know how to fix the past. And now I see that trying to hide it from you has only made things worse. I'm sorry for that. Emma's heart felt heavy. She wanted to believe her father, to forgive him. But the trust they had once shared seemed to be slipping through her fingers like sand. What happens now, Dad? What are you going to do about John? Her father paused, taking a long breath before answering. I don't know. John is a different person now, Emma. He's been trying to make amends for his past mistakes, but I can't make that decision for him. I've done everything I can to help him, and now it's up to him to fix his life. But I'll always be here for him if he needs it. That's the best I can do. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her father. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. Her father wasn't the man she had always thought him to be. He had a past filled with mistakes, and he had struggled to make things right. But even so, he was still her father, and she still loved him. I just want you to be honest with me, Dad, Emma whispered, wiping away a tear. I don't want any more secrets. I don't want to feel like I don't know you anymore. Her father stepped forward, pulling her into a tight embrace. I promise, Emma, no more secrets. I'll be honest with you from now on. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. As they stood there holding each other in the dim light of the barn, Emma knew that things would never be the same. Her father's past had been a mystery, but now the truth was out. And even though it had been painful to hear, it was the first step toward healing. The secrets that had once kept them apart were finally coming to light. But what would the future hold? Would her father and John be able to make peace with their pasts? And could Emma truly forgive her father for hiding the truth from her all these years? The barn was quiet now, the only sound being the soft rustle of the wind outside and the occasional creak of the old wooden structure. Emma and her father stood there in the dim light, the weight of their conversation lingering in the air. She had heard everything, the secrets, the past mistakes, and the guilt that had haunted her father for years. Her mind was still processing everything, but one thing was certain. Their lives were about to change, and Emma wasn't sure if she was ready for it. Her father, still holding her in his arms, pulled back slightly to look at her. His face was worn with emotion, but there was something different in his eyes now. It was as if, for the first time, he had truly opened up to her and in doing so, had let go of some of the weight that had been holding him back. I know this hasn't been easy for you, Emma, her father said, his voice softer now, full of regret, and I understand if you need time to process all of this. I've kept so much from you, and I don't blame you for feeling hurt. Emma nodded, her heart heavy. She wasn't sure if she could fully forgive him yet, but she understood the burden of carrying a secret for so long. Her father had made mistakes, serious ones, but he had tried to make things right in the only way he knew how. Maybe that was all anyone could ask for in the end. You've always been there for me, Dad, Emma said, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. But you've also been hiding this huge part of your life. I don't know how to feel about that. I don't want to feel like I'm in the dark anymore, but at the same time, I don't want to lose you. You're my dad. Her father's eyes softened, and he reached out to gently touch her cheek. I never meant to push you away, Emma. I just didn't know how to fix what I'd done. I thought that by keeping it hidden, I could protect you from the mistakes I made. But now I see that the only way to move forward is to be honest with you, no matter how painful it is. Emma felt the tears welling up again, but she held them back. She was tired of crying. She was tired of feeling torn between the love she had for her father and the pain of what she had discovered. But in that moment, she made a decision. It wasn't going to be easy, but she would try to forgive him. She would try to understand, because at the end of the day, he was still her father. I want to help you, Dad, Emma said, her voice firm. I don't know how, but I want to help you fix things with John. If you're trying to make things right with him, I want to be a part of that. But you have to promise me something. No more secrets. We face everything together as a family. Her father looked at her, a mixture of surprise and gratitude in his eyes. For the first time in a long time, he smiled. A real smile, full of warmth and relief. You're a good person, Emma. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll do everything I can to earn it. And I promise no more secrets. We'll face whatever comes next together. The air felt different now, lighter somehow. Emma wasn't sure what the future held, but she felt a small sense of hope begin to grow inside her. Her father's past was complicated, and the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least they were starting with honesty. And that, she realized, was all they could do. The next few days were filled with quiet reflection. Emma spent time with her father, talking more than they ever had before. They shared their thoughts, their hopes, and even their fears. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments when Emma felt frustrated or unsure. But each conversation brought them closer together, and slowly, Emma began to understand the full picture of her father's past. One evening, Emma and her father sat on the porch watching the sunset over the ranch. It was peaceful, with only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the distant calls of the animals. Her father turned to her, his face serious but calm. "I've been thinking about John," he said. "I know I can't change the past, and I don't want to keep living with the guilt of what happened. I've tried to reach out to him, but I haven't heard back. I'm going to try again. I have to make things right for both of us." Emma nodded, feeling a sense of resolve in her father's words. She knew he had been struggling with this for a long time, and now it seemed like he was finally ready to face it head-on. She understood that the road to redemption wasn't easy, but her father was willing to take the first step. That meant something. "I'll be here for you, Dad," Emma said. "Whatever happens with John, I'm here." Her father smiled softly. "I know you are, Emma, and I'm grateful for that." The next week, her father made the difficult decision to meet with John again. He didn't know what would come of it, but he knew he couldn't continue living in the past. John had been a part of his life, a big part, and despite the pain he had caused, he couldn't just turn his back on him. Emma stood by her father's side as he made the journey to the small cabin where John had been living. She was nervous, unsure of what to expect, but she was also proud of her father for taking this step. It was one thing to acknowledge the past, but it was another thing entirely to face it and try to make things right. When they arrived, Emma's father knocked on the door, his hand trembling slightly. It had been years since they had last spoken, and Emma knew this would be an emotional moment for him. The door creaked open, and there stood John, older, weathered, but still recognizable. For a moment, neither man said anything. They just stood there looking at each other, the weight of their shared history hanging in the air. "John," her father said softly. "It's been a long time." John nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "I know, I've been trying to fix things. I didn't expect you to want to talk to me again, but I'm glad you're here." Her father took a deep breath. "I don't know if we can ever fix what's been broken, but I want to try. I don't want to carry this guilt anymore." And so, in that moment, they began the difficult process of healing. The conversation wasn't easy. It was filled with apologies, explanations, and difficult truths. But it was a start. And for the first time in years, Emma saw the man she had always admired, her father, begin to make peace with his past. As they left John's cabin that evening, Emma felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. The future was still uncertain, and there was much more to be done. But for the first time, her father was no longer running from his past. He was facing it head-on, and together, they were beginning to rebuild the trust and honesty that had once been shattered. Emma knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that no matter what happened, they would face it together, and that was all she could ask for.